one of the one of Bruce Coburn's great lines, and we will have a recessional song by Bruce that's just one of my favorites. Uh, well, the refrain in that song is, oh love that fires the sun, keep me burning. Oh love that fires the sun, keep me burning." And that's actually what keeps me going. Love that fires the sun. Yeah, so hopefully we'll have something to talk about today. I just want to leave the screensaver up for a bit because it sort of says a lot, really. It our topic today, title of the talk, anyway, is ego and the big thaw. Uh, and the screensaver sort of talks about what it is, how things can transform. And oh, well, those ice cubes look pretty good on a hot day like this, but they can get in the way of something uh, more important. In the last song we heard coming in, Rumors of Glory. We have rumors about something that's glorious about this life, don't we? Rumors of glory. And one of the lines is, behind the faces etched in pain, uh, something is shining. Behind the faces etched in pain, something is shining. Rumors of glory. Yeah, so these are key images for the day. Now, I'm sort of launching a series of talks that I'll be giving that will explore uh, the vital importance of integrating psychology and spirituality. Um, One of the things I mean, a lot of the spiritual traditions we have are thousands of years old and they're valuable, but we have also modern psychology, late 18th and early 19th century, and so we want to integrate those two. I think there's plenty to get out of that because psychology really works with growing up, how as human beings we can grow up. There's people in all governments of great power that are basically adolescents. They haven't really grown up. And we know this. We know the pain of that. So psychology involves with becoming a mature adult that takes responsibility for their life and, can sort of function in the world. And spirituality is not, they're not separated at all, but spirituality is sort of, it's the, rather than growing up, once you grow up, then you can wake up. No kids really, no adolescent is really going to wake up, you see. So growing up and waking up. And the aspiration of today's sort of talk and inquiry is, what am I aspiring to? Why give the talk? Well, it's always for me based on human and planetary healing and flourishing. That's always the goal for me. That's the goal of my life, just to contribute somehow to human and planetary healing and flourishing. At a time like this, especially if you're uh, undergoing the climate change effects, you realize that we're on a planet and we're connected to it, and we got to start acting like it. All right, so I'm going to turn off the screensaver. You know. All right, there's two core questions that I've been living with for a while, and I think they're important questions for human beings all over the planet. But I want to give you these questions, and then we'll follow these questions. Yeah. First question is, who do you think you are? And this is a question that psychology deals with. Who do you think you are? And then spirituality's question is, what if there's something deeper and more precious than you think? What if there's something deeper and more precious than you think? Who do you think you are? Psychology is working with that. And then what if there's something deeper and more precious than you think? Rumors of glory, rumors that there's something glorious about us, something that is, in fact, what you truly long for. That's really spirituality's question. So these two questions they're not separate. We're holding them together. Who do you think you are? And then What if there's something deeper, more precious than what you think? In fact, maybe uh, there's something that is what you truly long for. I've been pondering these questions for a long time. This week, I pondered the questions, and then in preparation for this, because I said, well, it's time to, if you're going to launch into talking about psychology, you got to start with these big questions. And I wrote pages and pages and pages the way I do. I ponder it. I I sit in meditation, and then I always write after meditation. We're going to actually use that rhythm today. We'll just sit for 10 minutes in silence, and then I'll give you 10 minutes to write. We do that usually on our uh, big monthly retreat, but we're going to break it up today, and we're going to do silence and then time to write. Uh, so I wrote pages and pages the way I do because I just write after I sit, and then it all boiled down by the end of it, at the end of the week, to 134 words in 5 stanzas in a poem that's called The Big Thaw. So, really simple talk today. I'm going to read the whole poem through so you'll catch it on the ear and the heart. The heart listens, the mind talks, the heart listens. So, turn your listening heart on, and then I'll double back and read it slower, stanza by stanza, and uh, make a few comments, hopefully together, going through this poem in this way. Something will be in it that resonates with each of us. On our pilgrimage, I call I call people I work with fellow pilgrims. What is a pilgrimage? This pilgrimage is from confusion into sanity, or from confusion to love, I like to say. Well, here's the big thaw. And just, and again, if you're new, uh, I always send notes out, and the notes will have the complete poem, so you don't have to worry about keeping track of anything because the notes come out if you want them. And if you're new and you'd like the notes, just send me an email with notes in the subject, and just the email is looseleafhollow@gmail.com. Looseleafhollow@gmail.com, and I'll add you to the notes list. Okay, here's the poem, The Big Thaw. Our core wound is that somehow we feel disconnected from our true nature very early on. Our core wound is that somehow we felt disconnected from our true nature very early on. To survive, we had to form a kind of frozen facsimile of what we had lost. Most of us come to call this frozen facsimile me. Others may call it their personality. Some psychologists decided to call it our ego. Tomato, tomato, as far as I'm concerned. No matter what you call it, this frozen facsimile of our lost true nature, our feeling of losing the disconnect, of being disconnected, our feeling of being disconnected from our true nature. This frozen facsimile uses many refrigerants to stay frozen. This frozen facsimile uses many refrigerants to stay frozen, but its favorites are control, judgment, and resistance. Hoping to recover your lost true nature by trying to slay the ego is a fool's errand. Hoping to recover your lost true nature by trying to slay the ego is a fool's errand. The ego is not to be killed or gotten rid of. It just needs to be thawed out. Ego is not to be killed or gotten rid of. It just needs to be thought out. Genuine psychological and spiritual practices offer the necessary heat. Genuine psychological and spiritual practices offer the necessary heat. Come near these friendly fires and thaw out. You'll become what you truly long for. Come near these friendly fires and thaw out. You'll become what you truly long for. All right. Well, let's look at the first stanza. Our core wound is that somehow we felt disconnected from our true nature very early on. Uh, just to tease this out a little bit, we have a kind of core wound. Everybody does. I did a little 4 hour overview of the Enneagram for Emily Vickers and her mother and a couple of her friends, some of 4 of her friends earlier this week, and we talked about uh, the fact that none of us are a number like a 1 or 2 or 9 or all that stuff, but that we had a core wound, and the basis of all that kind of character armor or personality armor that the Enneagram describes at first, the first level of it, uh, comes because we felt disconnected from our true nature very early on. Could be in the womb during delivery. Delivery's not, it's not a lot of fun, or then coming out, not be able to even move or turn over. And what am I? I was in this nice, comfy, uh, dim light, food on demand, and now I'm in this cold, huge Astrodome, with a bunch of big beings running around. What is this? We get overwhelmed, and uh, and we feel disconnected as we're disconnected from our mother physically, but we sort of feel disconnected from our true nature. We feel it. We're not. We never are. That's the part of the glory, but we feel it, and to survive, we all of us in our little brilliance, we start to form a kind of frozen facsimile. A facsimile, which is where the name the fax machine comes from. The fax, it sends a fax. It sends a kind of facsimile of the letter we're wanting to send. That's fax machines are sort of out now. We can just use the internet. And the facsimile, the word in there, simile, means um, to use like to compare one thing to another using like as like or as, and so it's a kind of frozen facsimile of what we lost, and it's pretty brilliant that we can do that. That's the difference in the 1 through 9 on the Enneagram. We all have a different aspect of true nature that we can connect to. Like as a 1, uh, I connected to the wholeness of true nature. And so a frozen facsimile of that is, well, maybe if I'm perfect, people will love me. So perfection is not wholeness, but that's kind of a facsimile. Of course, wholeness is perfect, but perfection won't get you there. Things like that. So, rumors of glory, we all came in to this life. Wordsworth says this: we all came into this life trailing clouds of glory that were all too soon forgotten. Rumors of glory. And that is when I've talked to Tibetans. I had one stay here for 6 weeks who was a reincarnation. I said, well, how much you remember from your last life? And he said, not much, a couple of details. But the teachings are there, or his spiritual momentum is there, and the same for you and me. Um, the wound also can happen, perhaps, it's accentuated when the family we're born into, where somehow we're not fully seen or welcomed or accepted because of the circumstances. Maybe it's in war, Maybe your parents, it's the best they could do. Maybe you only have one parent. So that also figures into this sense of disconnection. Perhaps we're not fully seen. If you've ever watched Avatar, the movies, the greeting, the great way to say I love you is I see you. You know, uh, and the true nature we're talking about, you can language it in a lot of different ways. Buddha nature, being itself, the divine source, God, love, the life force energy, the force, as George Lucas called it. They're all just words we're throwing at it. But how does it feel to be cut off from that? And how brilliant it is to be able for our little intelligence to make a sort of facsimile of it, of what we lost. That's an interesting thing to think about, and that's the beginning of ego, but it's sort of brilliant, you know. Gee, if I could just be perfect, I could reconnect with that. When we're wounded, however, we also shrink in fear, and when you freeze things, they shrink. And so that's part of the problem where it's a fear. Ego is run by fear, which has a few pros, but mostly cons. And we'll look at these. All right, the second stanza. Most of us come to call this frozen facsimile me. Others may call it their personality. Some psychologists decided to call it ego. Now, personality comes from the word persona, which was a Greek word for the big wooden mask that they would wear in Greek plays. For one thing, you could wear a mask of a woman and be a man, or vice versa, but mostly it was that way. And it also had a projection thing. There was kind of heavy wooden masks that would have a mouthpiece because they didn't have, electricity and microphones and stuff. So that's where the word personality comes from. And it is a kind of mask, okay, of who you really are. And some psychologists decide to call it ego. There's a saying that is ego is Latin for I, me, I. But there's a saying that if you get 10 rabbis together and you have one line from the Torah, one line of text, you'll get 10 different interpretations. And it's sort of the same with psychologists. They're all over the map. They have different ideas of what this I is. And later, coming in September, we'll have a real psychologist, Scott Salath in our communities, is going to give us some real view of the heart of modern psychology and the very different views. And they're all valid. Yeah. So we'll get something more. I'm not a psychologist. I am interested in spirituality. Yeah. So it's slippery, this concept of ego. It's the Buddhists will tell you this concept of I and me separate from everything else is the ultimate slippery slope. Third stanza, and that's why I say tomato, tomato. It doesn't matter what you call it. We're dealing with something that's not only slippery, but can get in the way, as our screensaver saw. You had the whole thing of all these ice cubes, and then when they melt, you see what's underneath it. You see what's glorious about human beings. No matter what you call it, this frozen facsimile, our personality, our ego, uses many refrigerants. There's a lot of stuff going on in that mind of ours that keeps everything, frozen. I call them refrigerants. But its favorite, the big three, are control, judgment, and resistance. It keeps us frozen. It keeps our lives shrunk. And those three biggies, control, judgment, and resistance, they display on the Enneagram. Control at the top, 8s, 9s, and 1s. Control is premier. Judgment for the 2, 3s, and 4s, and then resistance for the 5, 6s, and 7s. It's played out there. Now, I do all three of those things. Doesn't just because I'm at the top doesn't mean I'm just interested in control, but it's sort of how they stack. If you're a 2, judgment would be first, self-judgment, shame, And if you're a 5, 6, 7, it'd be basic resistance in 3 different forms, and then also control and judgment. Wearing these 3 masks will shrink and contract your life, you see. Ice cube is really water contracted, you see. If you think of the picture of the scream, it's a contraction. Okay. And so get that. The major refrigerants, that in itself is worth the whole listening to the poem, because you realize what's shrinking your life. Anytime you're into controlling life, when judging anything, including most of all yourself, or just resisting life, your life's shrinking. Now, the 4th stanza is hoping to recover your lost true nature by trying to slay the ego is a fool's errand. There's a lot of that in ancient religions, this idea of slaying something that's getting in the way. You got to kill it to get out of the way. Well, you're not going to do it because you need the ego. The ego is, we'll talk about it as we'll explore it in later talks, but the ego has great managerial possibilities. There's a managerial ego, and then there's a representational ego, our identity, who I am. And you wouldn't want to get rid of the managerial part of it. And when you study whole brain, you see that there's 2 parts in that left brain, and you want, if you had no ego, you couldn't organize a trip to the bathroom. You'd probably be on the streets. So slaying the egos, it's a fool's errand. It's not going to happen, and it's not to be killed or gotten rid of, but it is to be thought out. Okay. The problem is not the ego per se, but rather our total identification with it. We think that's who we are. And especially, the managerial part of my ego takes up a lot of time, sometimes gets in the way, but it's usually pretty helpful. But the representational part of it, my identification with a certain image, who I am, what people think of me, that takes a lot of our life energy to maintain and defend. And you defend it when somebody says, well, I think this was a pretty crummy talk, or whatever. People say, I don't think you're so hot. Well, then we have to defend our ego. I mean, just think of our dear leader here, how much energy it sucks up almost out of the whole country. Our ego's defense department, we do have a defense department, spends so much energy defending our image that there's little left to grow or awaken to what is beyond the personality. That's the key thing about energy. If you spend so much energy defending and keeping a stable, the image, the ego's, it's not stable. Nothing's stable in this universe, but we try to make it stable. We try to have, this is my image and I'm sticking with it. Well, the problem is that takes a terrific amount of energy, life energy. And we need a lot of energy to grow and to awaken to what is beyond the personality. There is something beyond personality. There better be. And we all intuit it, I think. Now, the last stanza, genuine psychological and spiritual practices offer the necessary heat to thaw it out. These are 2 key. The third one would be grace itself. Just as the love that fires the sun, as Dante, Coburn is stealing from Dante, of course, which is a great source. So there's spiritual practices, there's psychological insights, and both are very valuable. They are the necessary heat. Come near these friendly fires and thaw out. And then the last line is, you'll become what you truly long for. We think there's something out there that if we could get to it and grab it and hold on to it, then we've got what we truly long for. But no, we truly long to become ourselves. That's the great secret. That is the pearl of great price. That's the treasure hidden in the field. You'll become what you truly long for. Now, this is a very, very, very slow process. You don't get it listening to the poem or in a day or week or a year. we've been as a community here six years. I've been doing this work blindly for many decades, but I've been doing this work for over 50 years, and I'm still on this path. I don't know where the path ends. Oh, so I may be teaching now, but I'm really learning as I go along. So meditation, inquiry, which is the basis for psychology, if you're working with a therapist or you're just even reading psychological text, uh, yeah, that thaws it out. And then just saying yes to the grace of the moment. Okay. Yeah. That that is because there's grace coming. There's the love that fires the sun is constantly streaming down. But if we're working with control uh, and resistance and judgment, we're blocking it out, just like we're blocking life out. You see. So Rumi says at one point, he said, uh, "Don't ever think that you can heal yourself." He's always factoring in the third thing, which is grace, which is whatever you call this life force energy of the universe. It's constantly trying to thaw us out, constantly trying to bring us to life. This planet has come back to life two times already, and it's trying to do the third, and so can we. Now, why would I'm going to end with just a short poem, another one that came out that would say, well, why do this? Yeah, and I call this news you can use, and then we'll end the talk and move over to meditation. This is called news you can use. The more you melt your identification with your personality armor, and it is armor, the more you melt your identification with your personality armor, the more transparent you become. Yeah. Uh, just think of the screensaver. Yeah, that's what it's showing. The more you melt your identification with the personality armor, with your personality, your particular blend of control, judgment, and resistance. It's kind of a chemical formula for wasting your life because you're resisting and you're trying to control and judge. All that just blocks out um, the love that fires the sun. You see. So the more you melt it's an identification with your personality armor. The more transparent you become, and the more you can radiate a healing, loving energy into this wounded and suffering world. That's where actually doing this kind of work with your being itself turns into a kind of action for the world. The more you become transparent, the more you can radiate from your very center, from your soul, kind of healing, loving energy into this wounded and suffering world. And I think everybody knows this world is wounded and suffering. And so that's where this contemplative work turns into action. And the world and each of us need this loving, healing energy. Okay, well, I think that's good enough for the talk.